Chapter 7. In Another Land. Almost immediately, the craziness of the last couple of days caught up to me. I hadn't slept in over 36 hours, and I felt like at any moment I could have laid down and dozed off. Because of this, the walk from the cottage to the portal seemed surreal. I was focused primarily on the man in front of me, his long arms swinging methodically on his broad shoulders as he led the way through the forest. He and I talked a little, but it was all surface conversation. I told him a bit about Toll and Shia. We talked a little about Corona and the market. Every item of conversation faded out almost as soon as it started, like trying to start a fire with green wood. On one hand, this was my father. There were so many things I wanted to talk about, to discover about him. And yet, on the other hand, my heart was overwhelmed with concern for my mother and for Cam. And even more, I was furious at Jack, the person responsible for all of this. All of these conflicting emotions paralyzed me emotionally, and I trudged on numbly. I could feel a similar struggle with my father. His questions to me and about me were gently asked, but there was a furtive look about him, and it seemed like his mind disengaged from his mouth. Jack was the only one who carried on with any sort of levity. He prattled about this trap and that animal and his conquest in the Threshold Forest. By his account, he was the greatest thing ever to happen there. "Maybe you should just be quiet," I called back to him. "You've forced me to go with you, but I don't have to listen to you." "What's the matter?" Jack sneered. "I thought you'd like to know as much as possible about this world." "I'd rather learn it myself," I shot back. "Maybe Father can tell us more about Taris then, since that's where we're headed," Jack called forward. "What do you say, Father? Any bits of information you want to pass our way?" Father kept on marching silently ahead of us. I couldn't tell the look on his face, with his back to me, but I did notice the clench in both of his fists. He was not enjoying this any more than I was. I wondered to myself what he was thinking about. Did he have a plan? Was there any way to get away from Jack's hold on us? I helped myself to some of the food in my pack. I offered some to Father, but he replied that he wasn't hungry. "What about me?" Jack asked. "It's your plan, Jack," I answered. "I'll let you figure it out yourself." He just laughed and pulled out some dried meat that he had in a pouch around his waist. Apparently he had figured it out. Everything he did was a calculated act to push my buttons, to keep me off balance. I had to force myself not to give in to his agitating ways. He was trying to provoke me, but I wasn't going to give him the pleasure of success. My mind drifted back to Cam in the pit. Had Keel found him and freed him? And what would he do once he was freed? Did he know enough to get out of the threshold before 3 days had gone by? Would he try to come after me? So many things were out of my control, so many loose ends that I couldn't tie up. Every step of mine was being forced. Every decision was prescribed for me by someone else. I felt like those little puppets that used to entertain the children during the Eventide festival. There had to be a way to get out from under Jack's oppressive control, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure it out. After what seemed like hours of walking, the day started to fade. Evening was approaching, and my exhaustion was almost overwhelming. Suddenly Father exclaimed, "There it is." The massive tree was easy to spot. Gradually, trees had been getting bigger and bigger. I noticed this in stages. One moment they all looked a certain size, and then, almost all of a sudden, they seemed bigger. But seeing the tree was unlike anything I had seen yet. There was no gradual increasing in size with the tree. It was easily 1.5 times wider than any tree that I had seen to that point. Its top disappeared through the canopy of leaves. I stopped short and looked at it in awe. It was truly remarkable. "There it is indeed," said Jack with a hunger in his voice. "Since it's almost nightfall, we'll camp here tonight. Taryn looks like he's going to fall over at any moment anyway, and it would do no good to enter Taris exhausted. I'll get some firewood and we'll all get some sleep, so we're ready for a fresh start in the morning." Jack didn't have to go far. There was dead wood lying within sight of where we were. But he did go far enough that Father was able to communicate quietly to me without Jack hearing. "I'm sorry for all of this," he whispered as we cleared out a place where we could lie down for the night. "It's not your fault," I told him. "This is all Jack." "I dreamed of this day for so many years, you know," he said. "I played out so many scenarios, things I would say to you, places we would go. I never thought it would be like this." "I'm just glad that I finally met you," I said. "There's so many things I wish we could talk about." There was an awkward pause. Funny how with so much to say nothing came to mind. "What should I be expecting tomorrow morning? Is there any way we can stop Jack from doing what he's doing?" I don't know, he said, looking cautiously off to where Jack was now returning to our location. I don't have time to tell you more than this. Things are not exactly as they seem. We will go to Terrace tomorrow. When the time comes, just do what I say, and we may yet have a chance. Oh, look, Jack called out jovially as he walked up to us. You two are really starting to hit it off. How wonderful. Jack formed a pile with the firewood along with some dried grass. I looked over him to my father, hoping for some more indication of what he had begun to say, but he turned away and started to get some food out of his pack. In a few moments Jack had a fire going. We sat down around it, quietly chewing on bits of bread and dried meat that we had brought along with us. As the fire started to die down, Father broke the silence. Jack, it doesn't have to be this way. Why don't we rethink things? No, said Jack flatly. We could go back and release Shemia, and then we could all go to Terrace together. Right, like when you used to tell me how I would find Terrace, Jack replied dismissively. Things are going just the way I want them to. We play the game by my rules, and everybody's happy in the end. He looked at us suspiciously. If I don't get into Terrace tomorrow, Mother never wakes up. Father looked long and hard at Jack. Jack did not look away. Finally, Father lowered his eyes. See? Jack sneered. My way is so much less complicated. Now enough talk. It's time for some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. With that he rolled over and went to sleep. Father and I looked at each other for a moment longer. He gave me one quick nod, and then he too rolled over to go to sleep. I did not know what was going to happen the next morning. Obviously Father had something in mind, but I had no clue as to what that might be, or how he would execute his plan without jeopardizing Mother's care. I lay my head back on the ground and tried to figure out what Father could be thinking. Those were my final thoughts as finally exhaustion overcame me and I fell into a deep, deep sleep. Surprisingly, I slept solidly through the night and was up just before the sun. I didn't know where I was at first, then it all came rushing back on me. The portal, Jack, Cam, my real parents, Keel. I turned over to find my father sitting up and stoking the fire. Jack was nowhere in sight. Where's Jack? I asked. Went to relieve himself, my father shrugged. He's just a little ways off and said he'd be right back. Sure enough, as soon as he spoke those words, Jack reappeared from around some trees. Feel any better? He asked. Good enough, I replied. Great, he said. Then let's get going. I ate a few berries and nuts as Jack loaded up his pack. Father gave a sigh and then kicked some dirt on the fire. The last vestiges of smoke were weakly making their escape as we finished cleaning and packing up our things. I felt a twinge of jealousy, wishing that I could join them. Ready? Father said, looking first at me then at Jack. I nodded. Been ready for a while, said Jack. Let's get on with it. Father looked at me once more and then turned towards the tree. Slowly he walked around the tree, gently running his hand along the bark. Then, just as Jack described earlier, there was a loud crack and a dark space began to open. A door appeared before our eyes, and inside I could see the staircase. Here's how it works, Father began. Once you start climbing, you will feel like your body weight has dropped significantly. You'll be able to take 3 or 4 steps at a time. Soon, you will pick up the rhythm of the climb and will be able to take 10 to 15 steps at a time. It feels strange at first, almost like you're falling up the stairs, but you will soon get used to it. In this way, we will transcend the staircase within the tree quickly. Still, it should take us a couple hours to reach the top. How big is this tree? I asked in astonishment. I don't think it's ever been measured, Father replied. Its height is more magical than measurable anyway. 2 hours? Questioned Jack cynically. For real? I'd done it slightly less than 2 hours once when I was younger, Father replied. But as this is your first time, I think 2 hours is a pretty aggressive estimate. Jack snorted. Well, let's get going then, he smirked. Wait, Father warned. When we get to the top, there is a landing. We all need to arrive together before we can proceed into Terrace. Why? Asked Jack warily. It is what the spell requires. We have to all go into the land together, and of our own free will. Fine, said Jack. Can we start now? Father again looked at me and then back at Jack. Try and keep up, he said, and entered the portal. Jack followed on his heels, and I entered the tree a moment before I heard the door shut behind me. I was ready for things to become pitch black, but there was a bluish glow that illuminated the steps. My eyes grew accustomed to the light almost immediately, and I could see that it was a strange type of moss that grew on the inside of the tree and glowed the eerie blue. Already I could see that my father was a long way up the tree. I could hardly make him out. Jack was closer to me, but still a ways up. I could tell he was struggling a bit with the sensation of climbing at such a rapid rate. I determined that being able to handle the climb better than he did was my immediate goal. It would only be a small success, but it was more than the success I'd experienced since I met him. I took my first cautious step up the staircase and shot up 3 steps. Even though I was anticipating it, it still took me by surprise, and I had to put my hands down on the next steps to keep from falling towards them. I took another step, and another, and very quickly felt the rhythm of the tree. Pretty soon I was taking 10 steps at a time, and then 15. It was exhilarating. I could feel wind rushing by me and blowing through my hair. At the speed I was ascending, I soon overtook Jack. He yelled at me as I passed by him, but I didn't pay him any attention. He could stay in the tree forever for all I cared, though I knew that he would reach the top no matter what. As the inside of the tree flew by me in a blur, I suddenly noticed that the bluish moss wasn't just randomly growing on the wall. It was a pattern that only became clear as I was going past at a fast rate. It seemed to be some kind of language, though I didn't know what it said. A few times I almost felt like I could read it, but then it became unclear to me again. Whether or not I understood it, it didn't take away from its beauty. I had never seen anything so intricate and expressive. Although the climb took a couple hours, as my father had predicted, the end of the climb came all too soon. The rush of flying up the stairs and the beauty of the moss on the walls left me feeling disappointed when I saw the landing with my father looking down on me. With a final leap, I landed beside him, breathless and smiling, despite the predicament we were in. "That was amazing," I panted. Seeing my joy brought the first real smile to my father's face. He wrapped his arms around me with joy and pride, as clearly elated as I was. "Is it always that way?" I asked. "Or do you get used to it after a while?" "I've made the trip many times, and it still takes my breath away." A moment later Jack landed next to us. His normally snide face was awash in wonder, and for the first time I felt a hint of affection for him. Our father seemed to notice it too, and decided to make the most of this new window of opportunity. "Jack," he said, "we don't have to do this. I know you felt betrayed when we sent Tarrant away. It's true that we sent him away because we loved him, but we kept you close because we loved you too. Jack, your mother and I have no regrets about keeping you close." For a moment we were all still. Everything was still. Our faces reflected the bluish tinge emitted by the moss, and I could clearly make out Jack's expression. It was as if he was struggling to wake up from a dream. "Jack," Father pressed, "I love you." Jack looked at Father for a moment longer. His eyes seemed moist in the subdued lighting. And then, slowly, his face began to harden, like water seeping into the ground, leaving only dry clay behind. "Too little, too late," he whispered harshly. "Those days are long gone." Father sighed and looked down. The moment had passed. "Whatever happens, Jack, remember what I said," Father spoke softly. "What happens now?" Jack asked, ignoring Father's last comment. "Now we open the portal and enter Terrace," Father replied. He grabbed a handful of the blue moss and rubbed it all over the inside of the tree. Wherever the moss rubbed the wall of the tree, it began to thin. Soon, pale, natural light began to seep into the tree, and in only a moment there was a doorway. Looking through the doorway, what I saw nearly took my breath away. We were standing on the top of a large grassy hill on the edge of a wood. The hill led down into a valley encircled by snow-capped mountains. In the center of the valley stood a castle of immense size. It was built out of roughly hewn stones, piled up one on top of the other to form walls and gates and towers. It looked like it might have been there for thousands of years. There was a light mist swirling about the valley, as if it was lost and trying to find a way to escape. "Terrace," Jack breathed. "I'm finally home." He began to walk forward, but Father put a hand on his shoulder and said, "We must all go through at the same time." "Fine," blurted Jack. "So what are we waiting for?" Father seemed suddenly encumbered by an enormous weight. "Nothing," he said. "Let's do what we came to do." I noted the look of resignation in his eyes. I thought it was because of the fact that Jack was getting his way. I had no idea that in the next moment Father was going to set in motion a series of events that would cost him his life. He knew it, but he was holding those cards close to his chest. With a final sigh, he nodded at the both of us. Then he did a strange thing. He said to Jack, "It didn't have to be this way." Then he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Taran, we have come," and we all stepped through the door. I fully expected to feel the grass under my feet and the cool touch of the mist on my skin, but that was not what happened. The moment our bodies passed through the doorway, there was a tremendous roar like thunder. I felt an impossibly hard jerk on my entire body, as if it was being yanked violently by a lasso around my waist. The last sight I had before everything went black was my father swiftly moving with me away from the doorway, and Jack's mouth in a frozen scream as he faded into the distance.